So the concentration of the essential element below which the plant growth is retarded is termed as critical concentration. So when these essential elements are not provided by the plant, then the cell division will not at all occur. The young leaves may shrivel and they may fall off before it reaches the maturity or the adult stage. So here what happens here is sometimes proper mobilization of the element might not take place. Hello everyone, a warm welcome to another session of chapter 12, that is mineral nutrition. I'm Dr. Divya, biology faculty, Vidhyaashram Pre-University College, Mysuru, Temple of Excellence. So the previous session of this chapter, we had discussed about the role of the macro and micronutrients in the overall development of plant. In today's session, we shall discuss about the absorption of these mineral nutrients as well as the toxicity level of this particular mineral nutrients. So to begin with the session, we shall first understand what are the different deficiency symptoms will occur if the essential elements are not provided properly to the plant. So all plants require different forms of nutrients in a specific quantity if the plants have to grow properly. But what might happen if all the chemical nutrients or the fertilizers or the essential elements are not provided at the right time to the plant? It will deprive the complete growth of the plant, or it will retard the growth of the plant and make it stunted, right? So that is why the addition of proper nutrients at the right quantity at the right time interval is very, very important. So here we have to understand about a term called as critical concentration. So the concentration of the essential element below which the plant growth is retarded is termed as critical concentration. Say for example, I might say nitrogen is required by the plant, that is for 1 kg of soil you need to add about 10 grams of nitrogen. So if I say for 1 kg of soil you need to add about 10 gram of nitrogen, then the 10 gram of nitrogen must be provided to the plant. Not more than that, not less than that. So that is called as the critical concentration. So critical concentration is nothing but the concentration of the essential element that has to be provided to the plant, and if it is not provided, it will retard the growth of the plant. So it is critical. That particular, I told you, for 1 kg you have to add 5 grams. So that 5 gram is the critical concentration there. So the element is said to be deficient when present below the critical concentration. So if I say the chlorosis is occurring in the leaf, maybe it is because of some of the essential chemical components that did not meet the critical concentration standards. So that is why each and every chemical, or to be specific, each and every nutrients or essential elements that are added to the soil should have its particular critical concentration, and that if it is not provided to the soil, it will completely retard the growth of the plant. So this is about critical concentration. So now we shall understand what happens if the critical concentration is not given to the plants. What might happen if the amount of nutrients that has to be added to the plants, if it is not added, what kind of deficiency might occur? So the absence of any particular element, the plant shows certain morphological changes. Say for example, as soon as you see the plant, you might see the leaves yellowing, or that is the veins are also usually green in color, the veins yellowing. And we might see the fruits before it ripens itself, it might fall off to the ground. So all these morphological changes that occur in the plant actually helps us to understand something is going wrong with the nutrition of the plant. And it is at that time we should add the particular required concentration of that particular nutrient to the plant. So these morphological changes are indicative of certain element deficiency, and therefore these are called as deficiency symptoms. I told you maybe the death of the plant may occur, or it is called as the death of tissues may occur, which is necrosis. So this is also one kind of a symptom, or the yellowing of leaf is one kind of symptom. So all these are the called as deficiency symptom. So deficiency symptom, the plant is being deprived of one or other nutrient which is showing some peculiar symptoms in the plant than the normal things. So that is nothing but deficiency symptoms. So the deficiency symptoms vary from element to element. So as I told you, if nitrogen is lacking to the plants, it might show a different kind of a deficiency symptom. If zinc is lacking to a plant, it might show a different kind of a deficiency symptom. So therefore, the symptoms that the plant exhibits when it is deficient to a particular nutrient or a essential element varies from depending on the essential element. So, and also they disappear. The deficiency symptom can disappear when the proper nutrient is provided to the plant. It is not a irreversible process, but it is a reversible process. So if you find a plant is not growing properly and showing some deficiency symptoms, you can understand, okay, the plant is deficient of so and so essential element. Therefore, if you provide that particular essential element to the plant, the deficiency symptoms can be reversed and the plants can again start to grow healthy. So, however, if the proper nutrient is again not added to the plant and it is neglected by the farmer or the gardener, whoever is growing that particular plant, eventually it will lead to the death of the plant. So, at the proper duration also, it is necessary to replenish the soil with nutrients so that the plants can absorb them at required quantities and grow properly. Otherwise, if we keep the plant deprived of essential elements for a longer time, eventually the plant will die. So, this is about the deficiency symptoms of essential elements. So, next talking about some of the other deficiency symptoms that we can see. So, the parts of the plant that deficiency symptom also depend on the mobility of the element in the plant. So, not all parts of the plant require all the nutrients. So, here, say for example, the falling of the flower bud. So, if a plant is deprived of certain essential element, it will result in falling of the flower bud. But if that essential element will not cause the premature falling of the leaves and all that, because it is specific to concentrate or provide nourishment to the development of the flower bud and to prevent the premature falling of the flower bud. So, if that particular element that is responsible for that is not added to the plant, then it will only result in the premature falling of the flower bud and no other symptoms. No other parts of the plant will be affected. Other parts will grow as usual. So, that is what it is meant here. The parts of the plant that show deficiency symptom also depend on the mobility of the elements in the plant. So, here for elements that are actively moving or actively mobilized within the plants and they are moving from the older cells or older tissues to the younger developing tissues, then the deficiency symptoms will start occurring in the older tissue. That is why the older tissues and all will start to senesce or they will start to wither off and the younger tissues will start to grow healthy. So, it is okay if the older tissues senesce, but it is always better to not make the younger tissues deprived of its essential element. The best example that we can take here of is the deficiency symptoms of nitrogen, potassium and magnesium. So, all these are essential elements which are visible in the senescent leaves. So, if you see the senescent leaves, that is the leaves which have fallen, the older leaves, they would have become yellow, the veins would have become clear and brown dark spots would have started appearing on the leaf, right? Why was that? Because from the older tissue, all the nutrients will move to the younger tissue and therefore the older tissues will be deprived of the nutrients such as the nitrogen, potassium and magnesium. Therefore, the leaves will die or it will senesce and it will fall off, showing symptoms such as yellowing, vein clearance and many more. In the older leaves, the biomolecules that are containing these elements are broken down, making these elements available for mobilizing to younger leaves. So, that is why in the older leaves what happens, there are some chemical components or biomolecules that we call. So, these biomolecules, they break down these nitrogen, potassium and magnesium into simpler forms, therefore supplying them or moving them into the younger leaves so that the younger leaves are capable of absorbing these components. And these, that is potassium, nitrogen, magnesium, being deprived in the older leaves, resulting in the senescence of the older leaves. So this is one of the best example talking about the mobilization of the minerals, wherein the minerals mobilize or move from the older leaves towards the younger leaves. So that is about one of the deficiency symptom, which first starts to appear from where the elements have mobilized to which part. So the parts which have received the elements will grow healthy. The parts which have lost the elements because of the movement of elements will start to senesce and will start to show deficiency symptoms. So next, talking about few more of them, that is deficiency symptoms also tend to appear first in the young tissues whenever these elements do not properly mobilize into the young tissues and they tend to remain in the matured organs itself. In some cases, what happens, you might have seen the young tissues. As I told you, the flower buds may fall off before it matures or before it opens. The young leaves may shrivel and they may fall off before it reaches the maturity or the adult stage. So here what happens here is sometimes proper mobilization of the elements might not take place. So if the proper mobilization of the essential elements or the nutrients does not occur in the plants from the older leaves to the younger leaves, so what might happen? The younger leaves will become deficient of these nutrients. Therefore, all the deficiency symptoms can also be seen in the younger leaves. So therefore, deficiency symptoms can also occur in older leaves in case of nitrogen, potassium and magnesium deficiency, and they can also occur in the younger leaves when the elements like sulfur and calcium are not mobilized properly. Why? Because sulfur and calcium are the important structural components of the cell and they are not that easily released from the older leaves. So if they are not easily released from the older leaves, how can they enter into the young leaves and maintain a proper shape and structure of the cell, help in the cell wall formation and all that? So that is when the younger leaves start to show the symptoms as well. So this aspect of mineral nutrition of plants is of great significance and importance to agriculture and horticulture. So as and when, so sometimes what happens here is the yellow leaves, if it is not deficient of minerals and nutrients also, they will become yellow and they will look as if they are deficient, the older ones. So it is difficult to differentiate for us whether it is actually deficient of minerals or is it at the stage of senescence. It is difficult for us to understand. But in the case of younger leaves, this can be. So this is not a problem. Why it is not a problem? Because the young leaves usually, they should not show any symptoms. They have to grow properly. So when any symptom is occurring in the young leaf, we'll understand, okay, there is some deficiency occurring in the younger leaf. Therefore, we can replenish the soil with the essential elements, therefore promoting the proper growth of the plant. So therefore, that is why these deficiency symptoms, understanding the various deficiency symptoms are very, very in terms of agriculture and horticulture so that he can get a good yield and a good crop at the end of the day. So these are some of the deficiency symptoms of essential elements. So we'll study in detail. So what are the different types of deficiency symptoms that we usually see? One is chlorosis. So chlorosis, it is the loss of chlorophyll. So chlorophyll is the pigment that actually provides the green color to the plant, right? But here in the case of chlorosis, what happens? Because of the loss of the chlorophyll pigments, as you can see, the yellowing of the leaves will occur. So therefore, we will understand the plant is deprived of certain essential element which is causing this particular chlorosis. We'll study about this detail in the coming slides. Next is necrosis. So necrosis is some portion of the tissues die. They become brown and they tend to die. That is called as necrosis. And stunted plant growth. The plants will become completely stunted. The growth of the plant will become completely stunted when compared to the normal growing plants which are given enough nutrition, and the ones which are not taking up enough nutrition, their growth will be completely stunted. And also the premature falling of the leaves and the buds will also occur. Not just that, the inhibition of cell division. This is one of the important features here, deficiency symptom, that is the cells will not at all divide. The nutrients, majority of the nutrients are, some of the nutrients are required for the mitotic cell division to occur in a plant for the formation of spindle fibers and all that. So when these essential elements are not provided by the plant, then the cell division will not at all occur. So this is also one of the major deficiency symptom that can be seen in a plant. So if cell division does not occur, then the proper growth of the plant will not occur. So these are some of the deficiency symptoms. So each of these we shall study in detail. So first talking about chlorosis. So chlorosis is nothing but the loss of chlorophyll from the leaves leading to yellowing of the leaves. So you can see here some of the leaves which have undergone chlorosis, which has turned yellow. It has led to the yellowing of the leaves. And this symptom is usually caused by the deficiency of some of the essential elements like nitrogen, we have potassium, then magnesium, sulfur, iron, then manganese and zinc and molybdenum. So if these essential elements are not provided to the plant at a required concentration, then it will lead to the deficiency, which is called as chlorosis. That is nothing but the loss of chlorophyll resulting in the yellowing of the leaf. So next deficiency symptom is necrosis. So necrosis is nothing but the death of the tissue, especially in the case of leaf tissue. And this necrosis is usually due to the deficiency of calcium, magnesium, copper and potassium. So necrosis will start to appear in the younger leaves. Therefore, making us understand that the mobilization of the nutrients from the older leaves to the younger leaves is not taking place. So you might have noticed if your mother, if you have a garden at house and the mother or you are interested in gardening, your mother usually what she will do is, she will just remove all the older leaves, which means that whatever minerals we might add, say for example calcium, magnesium, etc., will get utilized by more amount by the older leaves than the younger leaves. So in order for the younger leaves to take up more of the nutrients, she will just throw away or cut off and throw away all the older leaves which are about to reach the stage of senescence. So that is why it is done, so that the older leaves, that is especially these elements which I have mentioned here, they cannot mobilize because they are the component of the cell wall. Their mobilization from the older leaves to the younger leaves is very difficult. So if the older leaves itself is not there, then the chemicals from the soil will be directly taken and it will be given to the younger leaves, right? So that is why it is done. So therefore, to prevent necrosis, this calcium, magnesium, copper and potassium is very, very important. So next talking about the inhibition of cell division. So inhibition of cell division, addition of or because of not adding proper concentrations of nitrogen, potassium, sulfur and molybdenum. And therefore, when these are not added properly, the formation of or the mitotic cell division will not occur. It will inhibit the cell division. And if it inhibits the cell division, what will happen? It will result in the stunted growth of the plant. So that is why for proper cell division to occur, the nitrogen, potassium, sulfur and molybdenum are very, very important. Next, talking about delaying flowering. So delaying flowering. So all the plants have a specific time when they should flower. Because flowers are usually seasonal, right? Some of the flowers are seasonal. If they have to flower at a particular time, means the plant usually will flower at a particular time. But sometimes because of the deprivation of some of the minerals in the soil or essential elements in the soil, the plants will delay their flowering process. So essential elements like nitrogen, sulfur, molybdenum, if not provided properly in required concentration to the plants, it will delay the flowering in the plants when it is completely low. So low concentration will result in the prolonged flowering, or it will delay the actual flowering time of the plant. So therefore, for overall development of the plant, all these essential elements are very, very important. So next, talking about the toxicity of micronutrients. What might happen if more amount of the micronutrients? So far we had studied about the deficiency symptoms. If less amount is added to the soil, what might happen? That is lesser than the critical concentration. If it is added to the soil, what happens to the plant? It will start showing deficiency symptoms such as chlorosis, necrosis, then inhibition of the cell division, which results in the stunted growth of the plant, and also it will delay the flowering of the plant, all that we had studied. Here, what happens when it is added extra, above the critical concentration, more than the critical concentration? So the requirement of micronutrients, so micronutrients means, I told you, they are also called as the trace elements, right? So trace elements means they are required in just negligible amounts. They are required in very, very low amounts. So the requirement of micronutrients is always in low amounts, while their moderate decrease, even their slightest decrease also causes deficiency symptoms, and a moderate increase causes toxicity. Say for example, we need to add somewhere about 0.05 gram of the micronutrient. So 0.051 gram or 52 gram may also result in toxicity. So if it is 0.05 gram that has to be added, then only 0.05 gram has to be provided to the plant, not lesser than that, because lesser than that will result in deficiency symptoms, and more than that will result in toxicity to the plants. In other words, what it means is that there is a narrow range of concentration at which the elements are optimum. As I told you, if we need to add 0.005, then 0.005 is the optimum level of the micronutrient that can be provided to the plant. If it decreases less than 0.005 or 0.05, any number, for example, I'm just giving you an example. So if it is less than, say for example, if it is 0.05 gram has to be added. So less of it will result in deficiency. More of it will result in toxicity. So now, therefore, this is the optimum value that has to be added. This is the optimum amount that has to be added to the plant. Not less than that, nor more than that. So, therefore, what is the narrow range here? The narrow range is 0.05, for example. So, any mineral ion concentration in the tissue that reduces the dry weight of the tissues by about 10% is considered toxic. So, here, in a plant, I told you while we had started studying about this chapter, how to understand the amount of minerals that are present in the plant. One of the feature is by weighing the dry weight of the plant. By measuring the dry weight of the plant, we will understand the type of mineral component and how much it is present in the plant and all that. So, at the end, weigh the dry plant, when we weigh the dry matter of the plant, if the dry matter of the plant or the dry weight of the plant tissues is less, that is about 10% less than the actual weight, then it is considered to be toxic. That is, we can say that the plant has been subjected to micronutrient toxicity. So, such critical concentration are widely among different micronutrients, because micronutrients have a narrow range of optimum value. Not more than that, not less than that should be added to the plant. It is specific. But in case of macronutrients, it is fine. 1 or 2 points, if it varies also, it is not that big problem. But that cannot be done with the case of micronutrients. So, this is about toxicity of the micronutrients. So, for any element also vary for different plants. So, I told you again here the toxicity. So, how much amount should be added? What is the optimum amount that has to be added to the plant? That varies among different plants. It is not same for all the plants. So, many a times excess of an element may inhibit the uptake of another element. So, while talking about the essential elements in the previous session, we had understood how one element supports the absorption of the other element, right? So here also, if we add an micronutrient above the or below its critical concentration, it might inhibit the capability of the plant to absorb an other micronutrient. So that is why adding the optimum value is very, very important. Say for example, the prominent symptoms of manganese toxicity. So say for example, we have added to the plant extra manganese, which is a micronutrient. What might happen? So when manganese toxicity occurs in the plant, it will result in the appearance of brown spots which are surrounded by chlorotic veins. As you can see here, you can see the brown spots here and the chlorotic vein surrounding it in yellow color. It is chlorotic. Why it is chlorotic? Because it has lost the chlorophyll pigment around it. So therefore, this is one of the symptoms that first starts to appear because of the mineral or the micronutrient toxicity. And it is important to know that manganese competes with iron and magnesium for uptake and with magnesium for binding with enzymes. So therefore, if the plant has to take up iron and magnesium, then manganese has to be added properly or in an optimum level to the plant. If it is deprived or if more is added, then the uptake of these iron and magnesium will be hindered by the plant, and it will also hinder the binding with enzymes, because we had learned that there are a lot of micronutrients that are required for the activation of various enzymes. So the activation of various enzymes will also get hindered. So that is why addition of a narrow range of optimum value of the mineral component, especially the micronutrient, is very, very important. And not just that, manganese also inhibits the calcium translocation in the shoot apex. So in the shoot apex, that is at the tip of the shoot, the translocation or the transfer of the calcium from one part to the another will get hindered if manganese toxicity occurs. And therefore, excess of manganese induces iron deficiency in the plant, magnesium deficiency in the plant, and calcium deficiency in the plant. Why? If we add more amount of manganese, manganese will prevent the plant from uptaking iron and magnesium from the soil properly. And if iron and magnesium becomes deficient in the plant, it will lead to further other symptoms in the plant. And not just that, they will also bind with certain enzymes, preventing the activation of those enzymes. And not just that, manganese will also inhibit the transfer of calcium from one part of the plant to the other, especially in the shoot apex. So that is why an optimum value or optimum amount of the micronutrient should always be added. The symptoms that appears as manganese toxicity may actually be the deficiency symptoms of iron, magnesium, and calcium. Why? Because of manganese toxicity, the plant is not able to absorb iron and calcium properly, or the mobilization of calcium might not occur properly. And not just that, the translocation of calcium also may not occur properly. So that is why these symptoms, whatever we see, we might understand that it is you can call it as a syndrome. Because of manganese toxicity, the plant is being deprived of three other chemicals, that is iron, and magnesium, and calcium. So therefore, these symptoms, so whatever symptoms may occur because of the deficiency of iron, magnesium, and calcium, can occur if the plant is deficient of boron. That is the reason behind that. So next, talking about some of the mechanism of absorption of the elements. So how plants exactly absorb elements. So in the chapter that is transport in plants, we had studied about the transport of water and mineral nutrients in the plants, right? So we had understood about the Epiplast pathway, the Symplast pathway, and all that. So the same thing occurs here if the plants has to absorb minerals as well. So in the salt form, the plants will not absorb the minerals directly. The minerals get dissolved in the water that is there in the soil. It will form a solute, and that solute is the one which will be absorbed by the plant. So here, the process of absorption of minerals by the plants or the essential elements by the plant usually takes place in two phases or two steps. First is the first phase of uptake and the second phase of uptake. So we shall study what is the first phase of uptake. So it is an initial rapid uptake of ions into the free space or outer space of cells, that is the epiplast, and it is a passive transport. So if you remember what is Epiplast pathway, Simplast pathway, if you need to understand, you can go back to the previous chapter, that is transport in plants. So in transport in plants, if you watch the videos, you will understand about this Epiplast and Simplast pathway. So Epiplast pathway, as you can see, epiplast means minerals will travel through the membrane of the cells, that is through the intercellular spaces of the cells. They will travel and they will reach the xylem, and then it is transported to different parts of the body. And here it is a passive transport because the mineral nutrients or the essential elements are moving from a region of higher concentration. Where is it higher? In the soil. Plants have not taken it. So it has to move to lower concentration, that is to the plants, that is the root. The root are the ones which absorb, right? So from the soil wherein it is having a higher concentration of the minerals, the ions are moving from a region of higher concentration towards a region of lower concentration and reaching the xylem by a epiplastic route. That is through the cell wall. As you can see, through the cell wall between the cells, they are traveling like this. So that is why they are called as the epiplastic pathway. And next, it is a passive movement of ions. So the passive movement of ions in the epiplast usually occurs through ion channels. So these channels are called as the ion channels, and they also occur through the transmembrane proteins. So the proteins or the carrier proteins that are present, the transmembrane proteins that are there. So we all know that all the mineral ions cannot be absorbed directly by the plants because the plasma membrane of the plant, they are selectively permeable. Only some of the elements they will allow it to enter in through the plant cells, and some it will not allow. So that is the time when the carrier proteins or the transmembrane proteins come to help, wherein they act like vehicles carrying the minerals from the soil into the root to different parts of the plant. They actually help. So that is why the movement of ions usually occurs. It is a passive process wherein energy is not required, and it occurs through ion channels, and also it occurs through the transmembrane proteins that function as selective pores. So that is what. So the movement can occur as such. Some of the ions can as such travel through the ion channels, but some they will have to take the help of the transmembrane protein, because the plasma membrane being selectively permeable will only allow some of the components to enter into and not all. So the remaining ones that has to enter into the plant, it is through the carrier proteins that are present in the plasma membrane, which will help in the movement of the minerals into the cells and finally reaching the xylem. So that is the function. This was about the first phase. So the second phase of uptake. So here, in the second phase, so this is a rapid phase. The first phase is a rapid phase because continuously, rapidly, the ions will be taken. In the second phase, the ions are taken very, very slowly into the inner space, which is called as the Simplast. So here, as you can see, Simplast is through the cell, directly through the cell, reaching to the xylem. So it will travel through the cytoplasm of the cell. We all know that one cell is connected to the other through plasmodesmatal connections, right? So through the plasmodesmatal connections, that is via the plasmodesmata connection, these ions, the ions, mineral ions that are there, they will travel in through the cell. So through the plasmodesmatal connection until they reach the xylem vessels. From the xylem vessels, they will be carried to the upper parts of the plant body. So that is how it occurs. So the ions are taken in slowly into the inner space, that is called as the Simplast pathway. And the entry or exit of ions to and from the Simplast requires the expenditure of metabolic energy. Therefore, the second phase is the active phase. The first phase of uptake of mineral ions was a passive phase. There was no requirement of energy. But in the case of the second phase of uptake of mineral ions, here the movement of ions to the cells and from the cells, that is the slow movement of ions, requires a lot of energy, and therefore it is an active process. So the movement of ions is usually, and the overall the movement of ions, that is the mineral ions, is called as flux. And again here in flux, the inward movement of mineral ions is called as that is the movement of mineral ions into the cell is called as the influx, and the movement of ions out of the cell is called as the efflux. The influx and the efflux. So here, because in the second phase, the influx and efflux, that is the slow movement of ions into the cell and out of the cell is occurring. That is why it requires a lot of energy, and therefore it is an active transport. So this is how the movement of mineral ions occur in two phases. That is the first phase of uptake, which is the Epiplast pathway, which does not require the expenditure of energy, and therefore it is a passive process. And in the second phase of uptake, it is a very slow process which requires energy for the movement of mineral ions into and out of the cell, that is for influx and the efflux of ions, resulting in the expenditure of energy. Therefore it is an active process. So this is about the movement. So what you had studied about the movement of water molecules, right? The same thing, that is Epiplast and Symplast pathway. The same concept is followed here as well. So this was about the mechanism of exactly plant roots absorb the mineral nutrition or the essential elements in the form of ions from the soil. Because we had studied in the previous session, copper, it is absorbed as cupric ion. So almost most of the minerals are not directly absorbed. They are absorbed in the form of ions, and that is how the ions are absorbed through the first phase, that is Epiplast pathway, and the second phase, that is the Symplast pathway. So this was about the absorption process. So I hope you understood the session well, wherein we discussed about the deficiency symptoms that might occur if the plants are deprived of the essential elements below its critical concentration, and what might happen if excess of micronutrients are added above its critical concentration or its narrow optimal range, which is called as toxicity, might occur in the plants, that we studied. And also we came to know how exactly the plants take up the mineral ions from the soil, that is through two pathways, that is the Epiplast pathway, which is a passive transport, and the Symplast pathway, which is a active transport. So I hope you understood this session well. In the coming session, we shall talk about the nitrogen metabolism in plants, because we know that plants cannot absorb nitrogen directly. Nitrogen has to be converted into nitrates, nitrites and ammonia if the plants has to absorb it. So how exactly this occurs in nature, we shall study. So we shall meet again in the coming session. Thank you.